Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Death Chicks. We're very happy to be with you today, and we have Martha Jo Atkins with us. We're here to talk about death, dying, grief, and loss. We encourage everyone out there to tune in, be informed, and die well. Death is not something that we have to fear, and Patty and I are here to bring you guest experts and speakers and advocates of the death awareness movement and the dying well movement, and it's time we started talking about this. So with further ado, I will pass it over to Patty, who will introduce Martha, who is I'm really excited to have with us. Martha's doing research on death, and often we only hear the anecdotals, which are so important, but it'll be interesting to dive into a little bit more detail on the research. So thanks so much. Over to you, Patty.
Alrighty, thanks, Misty. Yes, today I'm so excited that our guest is Martha Jo Atkins, PhD, and she is the author of the book Signposts of Dying, What You Need to Know. And I've been wanting to talk with Martha since someone shared her TED Talk with me, which I highly encourage you to go take a look at. We're going to post that after the show. And then I began to follow her. And so what I found out is that Martha really kind of came into this world being comfortable around death, dying, grief, and loss. And she talks about holding her first funeral at age 5 with a little kitten, replete with a burial shroud, a cross made of sticks, and a ceremony. And I can just picture the whole thing.
It's crazy.
Absolutely. And then we take a fast forward today, where she is an end-of-life educator and researcher, and she does have a unique and often hilarious voice in this death, dying, grief, and loss community. So she is currently the executive director of Abode, Contemplative Care for the Dying, which is a really unique home in San Antonio where individuals from the community come together to help dying people who have no one to care for them or no place to go. She was also the founder of the Children's Bereavement Center in South Texas, where she served as the executive director up until 2005. So today we're going to be talking about deathbed phenomena. And you may, as a caregiver, have experienced this, where those who are dying may see, feel, hear the presence of others, of beings, perhaps angels, we don't know. But it's the caregivers can't see them, but there's something going on. And Martha says that she got wildly interested in deathbed phenomena and these events during her mother's dying process. So her research now is on the trajectory of dying, the sights, sounds, experiences, and language that the dying use as they are taking their leave. And I know this is going to be a juicy discussion. I thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate you asking.
Wonderful. Well, one of the things that I was kind of really curious about is, did you begin your career, working with the dying, or did you kind of come full circle from this first experience as a kitten and then later, become as an adult working with the dying? What led you to all of this?
So I had an opportunity to do an internship in child life at the Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. between my junior year and senior year at Little Methodist University in outside of Austin. Okay. And loved the hospital environment, and I had my first experience of working with somebody who was dying there. And then did more internship work and ended up at a level 1 trauma center in Houston with a really fine teacher named Richard Weir. And we worked in the burn center and worked in the level 1s where the terrible accidents go. And we would do preparations for kids to go see their parents, and for parents to go see their children who were dying or who had died. And I was 22, 23. I was enamored with that work, and enamored in a way because of the instant connection and the power in that, and then it didn't matter what color anybody was or how much money they made. None of that mattered. It was what was happening in that moment. And Richard was really a master of holding space for people, and I learned from him, and it's just something that's been with me been with me since then.
And would you say you were like a nat for some people, that ability to hold space, and I love that term, that comes natural, and other people there's resistance. Can you talk about that, and maybe just speak, if you will, on how we might be able to shift into more of the holding space if we are a person who may come at it with resistance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I'm an introvert, and so my default mode is to think before I talk. And I think in doing that, it allows other people to engage. And if I'm quiet long enough, I learned a long time ago, if I'm quiet, people will eventually talk and fill that space. And sometimes they don't talk, and we can just be still together. I had a professor who would tell me to count to 10 before I spoke when I was learning just to be a counselor. And so I can remember being with a group of young kids, all their parents had all died, and this little boy, just he had not spoken. He'd come week after week after week. He'd come to our grief stuff, and he passed every time. He didn't have anything to say. And one night I asked him, same question I always asked him, and he said, well. And I sat there and I waited, and everybody else waited, but I can remember counting to 10. And just as I was getting to 10, and just as I was about to move on, he spilled this story of his dad dying and being there and witnessing it. I've never forgotten that. That was 1997 that happened. And that, it wasn't just me. There was this co-created experience with all of the kids in the group and the adults leading it, but it was very much a co-created experience. And I think we have an opportunity to do that with people. I'm doing that with you all today. There are ideas about what's going to happen, and there's an energy exchange that happens. So we're in the midst of that, and holding space as I teach it here, I ask people to gather their energy in, to bring themselves in, to feel their feet on the ground, to feel themselves in their body. And I ask people to touch the door, the door frame as they're walking into a room. So we care for dying people here. And to imagine anything that will not serve them, or anything that will not serve the person or people in the room, to be absorbed into our home, and that our home is big enough to absorb that, and to go in clean and clear, and then listen. And in that listening, there's this beautiful opportunity to experience together. And that's holding space for me.
That is a brilliant ritual. I love that. I know when I work with women, when I can bring in a physical, do this with your body, to send a mental image or a message, it has amazing lasting effects. And one woman I was working with, she said her safe place, she saw a house. So what you just shared, there, I've touched my plant and it's doing a little dance. What you just shared helps solidify that, the house is a structure that we can touch. And I like that you use a door frame as a mental
threshold
image to leave what we don't need behind, and to enter clean. Yeah.
And both ways, going in and coming out, because those people all have things, and we take those things out and we don't need to. So on the way out, it's that same, I'm going to leave behind everything that doesn't serve me, and leave clean and clear.
Well, and that seems to really be kind of a great segue into what it must be needed when one is witnessing what we're talking about today, and that's deathbed visions. Because if you're not coming clean and clear, it can be, for a caregiver or a loved one, very confusing, perhaps scary. And perhaps maybe you can take us back a little bit. And I know you talked about your mom's story, that began to get you interested in what was happening here. So when this first occurred, well, I guess you knew it was coming, and you shared this observation with your mom.
Right? I did. She was still able to walk, and she was walking down a hallway, and I said to her, "Mother, you may have angels or people or somebody come to visit you, and if you do, will you let me know?" And she said, "Well, it depends on who it is." I don't know who she thought was going to come or who she didn't want to share with me, but we had a good laugh about that. And she walked on down the hall. And as she sunk further and further into her dying process, she eventually had visions. What I know now about the dying process and what I knew then are two different things. And I didn't know what I was seeing then. And in my father's process, it was a very different experience because I had 10 years of reading people's accounts, reading anecdotes, being with people, and then being with him. And it was like pieces of the puzzle were all popping into place. It was quite something. She was very agitated for 2 or 3 days and finally got calm. And her eyes were closed and she was watching someone under her closed eyelids. And I asked who she saw or what she was seeing. And she said she saw her grandparents and her parents and a favorite aunt. And I asked where they were, and she said they were on the road from the farmhouse. And farmhouse was a place out in West Texas where she spent lots of time as a child. What I know now, the family members come and people have visions of familiar places. And she was seeing exactly what many people in many different cultures and many different times have seen. And I have experiences that are new to me, and I wonder who else has them. And to be able to realize that this is an experience that happens with dying people, and it's quite common, and we don't have to be frightened of it. And there's a power in that, an affirmation in that. There was that for me. And I read Final Gifts, I don't know, 10 times, 15 times, 30 times. And each time could go back and say, oh yeah, mom did that, and mom did that, and mom did that. And that experience that was a big muddle started to have a form and started to have function. And I began then to make sense. And as I was doing that, I was making sense of my own grief experience too. So there were layers to that.
Lovely.
Yeah, I love when you're speaking. You do this thing with your eyes, and I do it sometimes too. And you kind of look up into the corner, and it's like it's a memory. And I did it so much more often after my mom passed. I would just go to the space, and it's that magical space. It's almost in between. It's a little bit of connection to spirit, or it's something else. But it's something that science or research can't put their finger on, go, that's it, and this is explaining it. And I mentioned before you're doing PhD research, and that's really great. And then I also mentioned anecdotes, but I just want to bring that on the table, that once we have so many anecdotes, and from all over the world, and this has been going on for eons, like that in itself is research, and that in itself is evidence. That's the human experience speaking loudly. And instead of staying, closed within families, it's coming, people like yourselves are bringing it to the research table and saying, this is a human phenomena, and it's about darn time that we started accepting it as part of being human and part of the living.
It is. I'm excited by Chris Kerr's research from Hospice of Buffalo. And he's been doing research on dreams for the last 2.5 years. He's got a documentary coming out in the springtime called Death is But a Dream. And he's
oh yes.
Yeah. And interviewing people about their dreams. And as I'm excited to see the documentary, and would love to, and I feel like I will meet him at some point and be able to have a conversation with him, because the work we do is so close. We just had a woman this last week, and I was asking her what she had been dreaming about. And she said, oh, they were weird. And then she said, oh, they were hallucinations. And I said, were they people? And she said, yes. And I said, were they people you knew? Yes. Were they frightening? No. And I said, those were visions. And she turned her head and looked at me, and I said, there's a difference. And we talked about the difference between visions, and I call them friendlies, the people who come to help. And I talked about how those kinds of visions come when the veil is thin and when you're moving closer and closer to leaving. And because we talk about that here, it was easy to have that kind of conversation. And that was on a Friday. We also did a forgiveness conversation with her whole family, and she died Sunday. And we were expecting her to be here another 3 or 4 weeks. But she was done. She took care of her business. I find when we have those conversations, they open the space for other conversations to happen, or they open the space for people to sink into their process. I'm often surprised, and maybe I shouldn't be, but I all of this work just delights me, to be talking to somebody one day and having these beautiful conversations, and to come back and they have changed overnight into the next level. And there's sometimes a little bit of sadness attached to that, because I know they're done and they're not coming back. And sometimes there's happiness because they've been able to go over that hump and get to that next place. It's really quite something.
Yeah, what you described to me is that range of bandwidth of emotions we talk about that gets to really show up in, I think, living color when we're with somebody at the end of life. And if I think that's part of the reason why many people are fearful or afraid, because they may not show up that way in their own lives. And this is almost shocking to the system sometimes that this reality is occurring. But I liken, the sadness, but I liken the happiness or the joy to kind of like farewell on this trip. And yes, normally we see people again and we get to say, how was it? Yes. This one, we don't get to see, but we get to muse about what might be happening based on some of these visions. And I remember so clearly with my own mother, and lots of it was fairly hilarious in a way, because my mother was a confirmed atheist. So she was like, I talked to her about there may be people. She was like, nobody's coming to talk to me. And then the next thing you know, there she is gesturing and talking. And I would, she wasn't really able to talk too much, but when she did, and I wanted to ask you about this, because in your TED Talk, you mentioned this word, and when I heard it again, I was like, oh my God, this was my mother's experience. My mother was not a sports fan. She usually had her nose buried in PBS or NPR or something like that. So when she said to me, she came back and said at one point, because I knew she was off, she came back and said, what is this place? And I knew she did not mean like, Bluebell, Pennsylvania. So I said, it's Earth, Mom. And she looked at me and she smiled like, oh, okay, it's Earth. And so I said, what were you seeing? And she said, first, a window. She was looking through a window, which that's come up for me with other people. Yeah. And I thought, okay. And then she said, it's a stadium full of people. And you mentioned the word stadium. And I was like, oh, somebody else has had this experience. And then after that, she says, but they're betting. But she said, it's like Penny Ante. It's like 139, 129. So I said, Mom, you're a bookie. Get the numbers. Get the numbers, because before you go, like, you've got to like tell us. We could be like lottery or something. I don't know. But I think that they were betting on maybe when she was coming over, and I don't know what it was, but towards the end, when she was still conscious, she would ask us how open is this window, and she said like this, like about a third. Yes. And I asked her a second time, and it was like bigger. Yeah. 2/3. So I thought, wow, when that window is open, she's flying, baby.
This
And-
woman last week was talking about ladders, which is also really common. They're ladders on the sides of the room that they can see, and people come down the ladders, or there's ladders outside. This woman was on the top of a ladder, and she needed help getting down. Somebody get me off of this. And we said, where are you? I'm on the top of this ladder, and I can't get off the ladder. And so I'm teaching my staff about having conversations. And so the response then that I suggested was, when it's time for you to get off the ladder, you'll know how to get off. And some other people would tell her, well, just let go, just let go. It's terrifying for her to just let go. She couldn't just let go. That language, when it's time for you to get off, you're going to know exactly what to do. When it's time for you to get the door unlocked, the key will be there. And there's that thing of they're almost to that place, but not quite. And she, they're asking more questions, which I love. They said, what do you see up there? And she said, I can't quite make anything out. And that to me lets me know where she is. Like, your mom doing this much and this much, that tells me something about where she was. And so this woman being at the top of the ladder, which is, she's at the top, but you can't quite see where she is. And there was a time where I'm certain she could see. And other people will talk to me about going upstairs and there is a locked door, or I've been able to get the door unlocked and there's people up there. And if you pay attention in the process earlier and can pick up on some of these things, when they get to that place and they start talking about being in that place, you can notice the patterns. And it's really, again, that introvert in me, I love to follow those patterns, and it's fun. We've lots of happens over and over and over, hearing sounds outside, like outside the house or outside the hospital, or there's a party out there, and then the party comes inside and it's out in the hallway, and then eventually people start coming in the room, and then eventually there's that internal switch that happens and the visions start to be here and they can see whatever they're seeing. And if we're fortunate enough and they can share with us, we get to hear about that process too. It's outside to inside, and I have experienced that over and over and over. And it's it helps us know where people are, and it helps us know how to then talk with their families, how to talk to the guests. We call them guests here. And watching their eyes cut around the room, and then having conversations with me, and being able to say, I wonder if you're seeing anybody. I don't know if you are or not, but just saying it's really common. And there's this slight nod. And sometimes people wonder if those are real or not. And I say they're real to you. The rest of us can't see them, but they're real to you. And one woman we had here, what was that movie with the guy's name was Nash, and he had schizophrenia, and all these people.
A Beautiful Mind.
Beautiful Mind. So
that was great.
There's an experience in The Beautiful Mind where Dr. Nash looks at somebody to verify if the person is real or not that Dr. Nash is talking to. So I talked to this person and talked to her about a sign we could have together, that I would pull my ear. If she looked at me, there would be some kind of sign that we would have together to help her know that somebody was real or not. And we did that. She did it with me one time, and that lasted for a couple of days. And then I ended up leaving. Then my dad got sick, and I was not here for the end of her process. I love, though, that we got to do that much. It was pretty great. Pretty great.
Really wonderful. I'm fascinated by this too, because it's, to me, I'm fascinated by this work, as you are too, and I know as Misty is, because the mystery keeps giving. It just keeps on giving. It's never ending, and we're not going to know till we get there personally. But to be witness to it, it feels that's that palpable sacred space that I think Misty and I have both witnessed. That that you could not know a person maybe 3 weeks before, yet here you are in this very connected space that is just so sacred and so beautiful. I had another experience with a dear friend of mine who was leaving, which mine tend to be kind of funnier. I don't know what it is, at least the ones that happen to me personally. I mean, I've witnessed other ones that I don't really know as much what's going on, but at least we can talk with people about them. Funnier in that our interaction, but it was not funny to her family. Her family was very upset that people were making this real for her when she was in hospice. So a lot of the conversations about what was happening had to kind of take place on the sly, so she didn't get frustrated, I guess you could say, by her family. And her family was just fearful. And so everybody tried to do their best to allay those fears. But one time I came in to see my friend, and it was very close to the end of her life. And she was actually able to ambulate. She could get up and walk around at this point with some help from the bed and the wall. And she came to me and she said, I found it. It was like the book of life. She was telling me it was the book of life. I found it, but I've lost it again. And so I said, wow, Rona, that's great. I was very affirming. That's great. And I sat down and she looked at me and she's like, well, get off your ass and find it with me. And then I was thinking I was coming in for a visit.
This isn't a time for sitting down.
This was not a visit. So then she got her ass in bed, and mine was underneath the bed looking, and I was like acting this out. And she was fine then. But before I just sat down like, well, good to know.
Yeah, right.
Get on it.
That's great.
And then shortly after that, she, became unconscious. But I'll never forget, I felt honored that there I was at the moment she was re-looking for this thing, and I got to help. But even if I didn't believe or didn't understand what to do, I know just based on my friend and her energy, I would have been looking for something.
Right. That's right.
So yeah, and I would have thought that, and it was. I think this was one of her, as I've experienced a lot, one of her, I guess, rally days while this was happening, that day or so before the actual active dying process, where I've seen many times where people kind of come alive. Mm-hmm. There was lucidity in some of this, but not at that particular point.
Yeah.
So what do you think is happening based on your research? What do you think this is all about personally?
I wonder if there is a larger connection. I think there's a larger connection. I think our bodies know how to die, and there's something in that process that you were talking about, the mystery early, that is part of the mystery. And you said before we got on the call about being brain or spirit, and it's yes. I have said, when I was doing my dissertation defense, I talked a lot about it's real to the person, so it's real. That's a good qualitative research, is that if it's real to the person, if it's a real experience to them, then it's real. And I believe that there's something that is happening for them to be able to let go of here so they can go to there, wherever there is. And we give medicine, and the medicine can ease the way and ease the angst and anxiety sometimes. Sometimes people get stuck in loops, and the medicine can get them out of loops. One of my staff was asking, she said, it's kind of like labor and you have to do a C-section when they get stuck. And I said, I think I would say it more like when you have to give the IV for Pitocin. So when somebody needs that little extra help to get going. And I see when people get the right medication on board and can finally relax into the process, it's the feeling is different. The energy of it, the energy of them, it's all this bunch of this magical stuff coming together. And this reaching that happens, the reaching changes too. So we see people that do the picking and they're right down in front of themselves. And then you'll see people move over to the side. They'll see something to the side and they'll reach that way, or they'll reach this way. They'll reach towards the window. And as they get further and further in process, they'll begin to look as though somebody's standing at the end of their bed, and they'll reach towards that person. And then things move midway around the room and they move to the top of the room. And very near the end, it's this. And I'm always, I have a reaction in my body when I see people doing the overhead reaching. It never fails. And I wonder what they see. My dad said, his eyes are closed, and he says, "Can somebody turn off that light? What is that bright light?" And I thought, oh my gosh, the light already? Is it time for the light? And he, several times in his process, and eventually it was this kind of thing, and it was the light up there, and he could see it, and there was some amazing experience he was having, and his face belied whatever it was. It was beautiful. And at his end, people's eyes get glassy sometimes, and his eyes were just as glassy as they could be, and his breathing was changing, and his eyes cleared. And I have not been standing with someone and watched their eyes clear. And maybe it was because I knew him so well. I don't know. It was, that whole 5 weeks was quite something. But they cleared, and he saw something, and he smiled, and then he took a breath, and he was done.
Wow.
And so he was having an experience, and it was part of a connection that I was not a part of. And it was real to him, and I think it was more than his brain. And I don't have anything to base that on other than I think it was. And I have seen over and over and over and over and over again, and heard over and over and over and over again about similar experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have too.
I have.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Misty. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that when you say the eyes cleared, let me see if I can say it.
Yeah.
So there was some concern or reaching or uncertainty, meaning the eyes might be a bit cloudy, and then you were looking at him, and all of a sudden the eyes cleared, meaning like you sensed he was relaxed and at peace.
No, I mean,
and then there
eyes
was, what do you mean, like cleared as in like the death clear, like that?
It looked like he had a film over both of his eyes, and that film went away, and he was clear-eyed, looking up, got a smile on his face, done. And then they glassed, and then he had one eye a little bit open, and it got glassy again. I don't know what it was.
It's like, I don't know. It just feels metaphorically.
I was going to say the metaphor is magic.
Yes, the metaphor, magic, and it's like there was this window of clarity, like and off to the next. That's pretty amazing that you got to see that, and I know you've been with a lot of people at the bedside.
Yeah, and it's different when you were with your mother. How was that experience different for you versus being with other people you didn't know?
That's a great question. One of the striking differences to me was that this was not a woman of like a faith-based human. She was a social worker, and she was probably one of the most spiritual people we knew, but she didn't view herself that way.
Yeah.
She saw herself very, I exist now, and then the lights go out. This is what she talked about all her life. And she was very honoring of it all. And so, and did not, felt if that's what people needed, that's great. So what felt very different to me was that this was, and I wouldn't even use the way God, this was like, when she was at the end doing that reaching, and I call it negotiating, because that's what my mother would have done.
Oh,
negotiated.
Nice. Yeah.
She would have negotiated her way out. Go.
Yes.
And it was very, and she would use her hands a lot to speak, but it was even more so, more exaggerated. And it was more, I watched in her eyes, it wasn't even so much because she had such a great deal of confidence. It was this, like this learning. She was soaking something in.
Yes.
That felt different because I didn't know necessarily the personalities of all the people that I've been with.
Right.
So in watching her, there was this glorious feeling that there is something that's above and beyond just her brain shutting down. Because if it were not, this woman who I've known for all of my life and who had a certain persona was not going to be addressing this thing as she was, whatever that was.
Yes.
So that felt very different to me. And this look that I've never seen. There was a confidence about her always. There was a generosity about her always. There was a look in her eyes. This one was like, this is different. I'm listening up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and just the glory of being able to talk with her in that state when she could talk. Then she couldn't talk when she was doing the reaching. It was just observation. Yeah. And I actually thought about, she would have been okay about filming this. Yeah. But in that moment, I decided, no, that was very private to her and private to me. And I thought I would let that go. But there are some parts of that I wish I had captured, if not only for me to relook at and to examine, but I can run it over and over again in my brain, because it stays pretty indelible. And I wish for everyone, the way I did, that they have nothing left to say at the end.
Yeah, we often do the Ho'oponopono prayer in our own version of that. Please forgive me. I forgive you. I love you. Thank you. Goodbye. And we talk to people about how rehashing all of the things that you feel like you need to get or give forgiveness for may not be helpful here. And you can encompass all of that in this prayer, and you can do it whether your person can talk back to you or not. And I had an 85-year-old African-American woman who was very devout Baptist, and I sat with her shoulder to shoulder, and she was watching her son die, and she was bereft, had sunglasses, she would not cry, and she eventually cried. I talked to her about the Ho'oponopono prayer, and she told me the next day she was able to do that with him. And for her, it was a gift she could give herself, and it was a gift she could give him, and it was still painful. She was losing her baby, her 50-year-old baby, but it was her baby, and there was some peace in the midst of that she could carry with her when she left. And I'm with you. As often as we can create space for that kind of experience to happen, we try to do that.
Yeah. I think because the grief is so deep that if people don't have tools or help or assistance or presence, as you so beautifully mentioned, then it's hard for that to be out there. It's hard for people to integrate that into everyday living.
Yeah, I agree.
Misty,
it's a beautiful prayer.
Misty, didn't you have some experience with your mom? Misty, I was going to say, with your mom?
Yeah, I can share that. Just before I do so, the version I've heard is Ho'oponopono, but it's I'm so sorry, I love you, please forgive me, I thank you. And then Ho'oponopono, 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 Ho'oponopono. And when I heard this, the chant was so rhythmic and so really touching. And it switches between those words and Ho'oponopono. And I'd heard it, I think it was on a 5-minute recording, and that stayed with me throughout the day. And then it stayed with me the next day. And then I listened to it again because it would pop in every now and then. And I found it deeply comforting. Mm-hmm. It was really lovely. Now, what happened with my mom, it wasn't a deathbed vision, but it was a communication, maybe, perhaps. I think it was. So what happened was I got the call that she was in the hospital. It wasn't looking good. So I booked a flight. I live in the Arctic. She was in BC. The flight was delayed due to weather for a whole day. And I was in Yellowknife, and I had to pull things together really quick. I had my daughter was 2 at the time, or no, I think she was 4. Yeah, she was 4. And I was in the shower that morning, and I'd phoned the hospital, and we wouldn't be arriving there until 10 at night, which would be very late for my 4-year-old daughter, and we had to travel all day. We couldn't, it wasn't a direct flight. So I'd asked and I didn't know anyone in the town where she was in the hospital. I'd asked, and my sister was gone, so there was no one. I'd asked the nurses if they could mind my child for a short time while I went in to say goodbye to my mother. And they said, we can't guarantee that because we can get a call. So I was in the shower that morning before getting on the plane, and I was thinking this, and I was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to properly say goodbye to my mother with a very tired child? And I knew my mother, in her state, she had lost a lot of weight and quickly. So visually, I knew it was going to be disturbing for my daughter to see. She looked very different from the grandmother she knew. So I was deliberating this in the shower, and I got out of the shower, and within 20 minutes, I got a phone call that she had passed. And I knew, I was like, oh, okay. And I knew that she heard me, and that she's like, it's okay, Misty, I got it. And that's just something that I knew. And there was another beauty spot in this, in that the window that I had, there was a layover in Calgary, and there was 3 of her sisters at the time were in Calgary, and we had about a 2-hour layover. And within that short period of time, they got together, and some of them lived a few hours from Calgary, but they got together and met us for dinner at the airport in Calgary. So that was a really special time and a treat to have that connection on that day. And yeah, so that's my story. Yeah,
It's lovely.
Really. Well, I see that we're heading to the 45-minute mark, and I would love to just kind of get your take on, what you think these visions can say to us as those who would witness them. And I kind of liken the whole experience to actually working with folks who have dementia, not trying to reorient them to the regular world. And I know that was actually a conversation I had with my mom as one of her friends was dying. She thought that the proper right thing to do was to reorient them.
Right.
And then the experience of it all over again, the trauma that can cause. So what kind of information or advice would you give to caregivers as we begin to close our discussion? And also, we want to know how people can get in touch with you.
So my mantra in my book, if you read my book, you will see it over and over and over, is meet people where they are. And it's funny to me to hear people say that back to me. As a woman I didn't know very well said that to me today, and it makes me chortle a little bit inside. But it is that it's to be with them. They don't want the pillows behind them. You take the pillows off. They need the pillows. You put the pillows back. They need the suitcases. You tell them the suitcases are in the closet. It's the gathering of the things, and people don't understand about the gathering of the things, and that's very much part of the process, and it aggravates family members. And you can just bring a few of those things. I have a picture of my father with his notepad and his pens, and he may have had a pocket. I think the pocket knife was on the table, but he had those things, and he needed his things because he was getting ready for his trip. And if you can think about that as you're working with your family person or living with your family member who's dying, think about this as being a journey, and think that, or you have an opportunity to think about how they're teaching you about your own dying process. When you have an opportunity to sit at the bedside with somebody you love and be with them, be the daughter, be the son, be the wife, whatever it is you are. And it's okay to take that hat off for a minute and just watch and observe and think about your own experience that you will have. We're all going to have someday, and what that might be for you. And you look at them and are they in pain right now? They don't seem to be in pain right now. So maybe not everybody who's dying is in pain. Or ask questions about their breathing. And what does this breathing mean? What does this reaching mean? What are these things they're saying that sound so outlandish? And if you're lucky enough to be with somebody who speaks the language of the dying, and I hope you will be, then you can learn about these things and begin to think about your own loss. And I often invite family members to thank their person for giving them this last gift, this amazing gift that you get to be with them at these last moments in their life. And this is not their whole life. This is this part, and not everybody gets to be at this part. And it's an amazing, I'm going to use the word gift again. It is an amazing gift to be able to be with somebody at that place. And if you can reframe your thinking about that, yes, it's sad, your person's leaving, you're going to miss them. And there's layers to this. There's pieces to this, and you get to make meaning in different ways. And how can you make meaning in ways that'll help you feel better as you move into the grieving process? So there's that.
So there's that.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I didn't preface my story with one thing, and it kind of connects. And that was that when my sister was there, when my mother had gone, not in a coma, but the doctor said there was no physical reason that she should still be alive.
Yes.
My sister was there. She was no longer communicative. And I asked her, I said, can you put the phone to her ear? I just want 2 minutes. And in those 2 minutes, I did say goodbye. And I said, I'm on my way. I hope to see you, but if you need to go before I get there, that's okay. All's well, and you do what you need to do. So I had done that. And I think because I did that, I think when I was in the shower worrying about this, I really felt connected, because when we got the word, I had someone remotely sit with me, because the doctor phoned at one point, and this was 4 days earlier, and said, that's it. It might be 20 minutes. So I phoned a good friend who's a bit of a psychic and connected, and I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, how about I just hold space? So we sat there for 20 minutes holding space so we could be with my mother as she passed. And we sat there for about an hour, and the phone call didn't come. And 4 days later, she was still alive. And but that's part, ever since we started holding space, that whole time in between, I was in that space. I felt like I was there with her, and she was in that in between space. And that's such a beautiful space. And that experience and that space between, and my experience of having touched that slightly, even remotely, that's what called me to come in and to step up and start talking about death, because it's so sweet. It's bittersweet, and I'm so thankful that there's more people talking out about it.
If you guys have not interviewed William Peters, you should do that. He's with sharedcrossings.org in Santa Barbara, and you can email him and tell him that I sent you. And he talks about that in-between space and the shared experiences that witnesses have at the bedside with the person who's crossing, and the out-of-body experiences that often occur. It's fascinating to listen to him talk. He would be a fun person for you to visit with.
That's great.
Yeah.
I have heard of, I didn't connect him with Shared Crossing, but I heard of that experience, and perhaps he can talk about even facilitating those kinds of things.
He can, and he teaches that, and we do some of that, teach our family some of those things here. It's pretty amazing.
That's when the window, that's the beauty of this death space, is that those windows are open for not only the person to pass through, but their family to begin to look at this very, very differently, make different kinds of meanings, as you shared, and where some people might be resistant when they're in it and needing a way. That just sounds like a beautiful opportunity, and I'm sure people step up, some don't, but I'm sure lots of people do.
It's fun to, people get into conversations about whether pre-death visions or deathbed phenomena are real. And I often think of William and think of people who sit at the bedside and have experience with the person who's dying, and the person who's dying may or may not be on medication, but the people who are at the bedside are not. And yet they have the same experience. So that makes you go, maybe there is something more to this. Yeah, it's fun to jump into the mystery and ask those questions and ponder with people who can do that with you.
Yes.
Yeah, great stuff.
I've often called this I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I've often called this a delicious mystery. Some people didn't get this, but I know now where to use that statement. It's with people who understand and don't think, what would you be talking about?
Exactly. Yes, you have to use it with your people. I'm your people. I totally get it.
You are totally our peeps. That's it. We've got our tribe going here.
That's right. We do.
Oh, right on. Well, that was a super great interview, and thanks for the lead there, and we'll follow up with that. Is there anything else you want to share before you go? And please let people know how to get in touch with you. And maybe we didn't talk about abode. Do you want to briefly just touch on that so people can find out more?
Sure. So I'm the executive director at a hospice in San Antonio that's part of the Omega Hospice Network. It used to be called the Social Hospice Network. There are homes popping up around the country where nonprofits are created and homes are created, and people from the community come in and take care of dying people. And that's what we do here. We're a house. People are referred to us from hospices. They have to have a hospice to come here. And we care for people who don't have a place to go. Medicare pays for the hospice benefit, but it doesn't often pay the $200 a day for somebody to go to a nursing home. And lots of families don't have that. So if they're in financial straits and don't have a place for their person to go, or perhaps they're elderly and they can't change and move their person at home, there's a number of different reasons they come, but primarily it's financial, or they just don't have the capacity to care for them. And we act as extended family, and we care for these people, give them their medications. The hospice comes in and does all the hospice stuff, and we get to sit and be with them. And because we're this contemplative foundation, presence is very important here, and we talk about our experiences with our guests and our guests with us, and we're not afraid of feelings, and we're not afraid of dying, and it's just a remarkable place. So I've been here since May, and I hope to be here for a long time. It's pretty great. So that's that piece. And then I have my website is marthaatkins.com, and I'm got some things gearing up for next year, and that's me.
That's your story.
That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Yep.
Well, lovely. Thank you so much once again. Misty, anything else for you that you want to share before we wrap up?
I'm just really thankful to have you on, Martha, and I'm going to post a link on social media that has a link to your TED Talk and your website. And just thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for getting out there and sharing these stories and making it real.
Thank you. And thank you all for doing what you do. It's taking all of us.
Yep, it sure does.
Nice to meet you guys. Thank
you too. All right.
Alrighty.
Take good care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.